All right, new problem, and let's get after it here, where we read the question sentence first, and it says, "How many units remain?" Okay, my party people. So when we think about the word here, remain, what does that really hint at? We might need to do at some point in this problem. When we're asking how much is left, how much of something remains, right? How much is left over? That's subtraction. Absolutely, that is subtraction. So I'm going to highlight that over here. How many units remain? And I'm going to just make a note that we may have to subtract to see what's left. We may have to subtract to see what's left. So when we consider the information, again, take it nice and slow, bit by bit here, we see that it says a warehouse has 1,200 units. Okay, we start with 1,200 units, and then it says in the morning, 30% are sold. Okay, so 30% sold in the morning. And then it says later 150 more are sold. Okay, so then 150 more are sold. So everybody, when we consider all of this in total, all together, let's tell a story. To get how many units remain, how many units are left, you tell me, yes or no. Does it sound like we need to take the units that we started with, the 1,200, we need to subtract what we sold in the morning, and then we need to also subtract what we sold later that day. Everything that says sold really means that we want to subtract that. Is that fair to say? Yeah, absolutely. And how we do that, there's a couple of different ways that we can do that. Because this 30%, we have the option of calculating straight up by saying 30% times the 1,200, and that's going to give us how many were sold in the morning. We can do it like that, or we can flip it and say 70% times 1,200. Everybody, what does the 70%? This is a pop quiz, so don't freak out if you're wondering where the 7 came from. But if I ask you, hey, what does 70% represent? If 30% represents what are sold, what would the 70% represent? Yeah, the remaining after the morning. So this is 70% shows what's left after we sold in the morning. So you can go either way depending on what you're comfortable with. Because if you start here, you'll get a number that's sold and you can add it with this and subtract it from 1,200. Or you start here with 70% and then all you have to do is subtract 150 from whatever this number is. I'll show you both ways just so you're clear on what I mean. But let me just move this over here for now. So 30% times 1,200, instead of doing the whole twice over here, I'll do twice over here since it's a little simpler. So we have 30 times 12. Everybody, 30 times 12 is pretty straightforward because 12 times 3 is 36. So 12 times 30 is 360 that were sold in the morning. So we have this 360. And then we also have this 150 that was sold a little later. So if we add these together, everybody, if we add both of these together, how many total have been sold at this point? 0, 6 plus 5 is 11, carry the 1, and that is a 5 for 510. So everybody, 510 again have been sold. I noticed that C is 510, but, and this is huge, that's not what we're looking for. We're not looking for the number that were sold, everybody. One more time, what is it that we're looking for again? We're looking for the amount that remains. So this is why it's more important to understand the context, the story, than it is about remembering and memorizing the numbers. It's way more important to understand that. So when we did that, we have the 510. We had to subtract that from the 1,200. 1,200 minus 510. Let's get that done. First of all, I'm going to just borrow. I'm going to turn this 2 into a 1. So this is a 10. So we will end up having 0 minus 0. 10 minus 1 is 9. And then we have 11 minus 5, which is 6. And so everybody, the number of units that remain would end up being 690. 510 is the amount that was sold. 690 would actually be the amount that remains. And so that's the first way we could have gotten that done. I want to show you the other way we could have gotten this done before we move on here. So allow me to just grab this, make that much smaller, and let's put that right over there. And here is the other way we could have done this, with the 70% times 1200 to start off with. Let me take the rest of this that's on the right side and push it over here. And let me just show you. So we have 70% times 1200. That can be 70 times 12, which is going to give us what? 840. So this right here, 840, this is what remains after the morning. So this is what remains after the 30% was sold. Now that we're here, everybody, now that we're here, what do we do with the 840? What do we do? Yeah, we're going to subtract. And for those of us that are just catching on here for this, the 70% came from, hey, look, if we sold 30%, that means that the 70 is what's left. So that's what remains after the 30%, 840. And then if we subtract right over here, the 150 that we sold again, let's subtract this. 0 minus 0, that's going to be 0. 4 minus 5, can't do that, so I'll just borrow 1. 14 minus 5 is 9. 7 minus 1 is 6. And there we are. Same correct answer in just more than one way. So again, the correct answer here, my party people, is B, 690. So let's go ahead and handle this question together. And as always, the first thing we'll do is we'll ask, what's the question sentence? What do we want? And when I read here, what is the perimeter of the yard? Well, I think that gives away the house, because when we look at that, there's a very specific geometry word, perimeter, and we might be lucky enough to understand what formula we're supposed to use if that shape is given, which it is right here. So we have a rectangular yard, we want its perimeter, and so we have to make sure we just list that formula correctly. The formula is going to be the perimeter of a rectangle is double the length, and we're going to add that with double the width. Just as a quick 2 seconds here, just to understand where that comes from. When we think about a rectangle and we think about perimeter, remember that perimeter is the distance around a shape. And when we think about a rectangle, we have the length down here and the same length up there. That's where the 2 comes from. 1, 2. And then we have double the width, and that's because we have the width over here and over there. So that's where that 2 comes from, because you're just multiplying it by 2, just shorthanding it. Instead of saying width plus width, we're just saying double the width. So with that, that's where that formula really comes from. And now what we're going to do is just plug in the values that we have and calculate. So here we go. The perimeter equals double the length, and the length can be considered the 18 or the 7. It really doesn't matter. So I'll just go ahead and plug in the 18 here, and I'll plug in the 7 over there. So next, what I'll do is we'll have 2 multiplied by 18 with a little bit of mental math. That'll give us 36. And then 2 plus 7, that'll be, 2 times 7, that'll be 14. So from here, we're going to finalize this by doing 36 plus 14, and that's going to give us 50. And there we are. There is our answer. The perimeter is 50 feet, and we are all good.